Well, judging by who you listened to last night was either an ambush or just a pure disaster for South Africa, for Cyril Ramaphosa, and for Donald Trump's latest uh, salvo against South Africa. But we don't listen to Vox Populi. We like to listen to the people who really know, and someone who studies this. And in fact, it's his job to follow these issues and also to give us an independent view is John Endres. He's the chief executive of the Institute for Race Relations. John, I don't have to ask you if you were watching it live, but I guess the question is like a good book. Did you read it twice? Did you have another look at the what went down yesterday in the Oval Office?
Well, pretty much. You could actually have asked me if I was watching it live because I wasn't. I was actually delivering a briefing at the same time and found it quite hard to concentrate because, of course, I would have wanted to see what was going on. But I did watch the recording afterwards and made some notes. And yeah, what a fascinating encounter that was. Absolutely fascinating.
Well, let's have a look at how a reputable independent news outlet managed it. On Bloomberg News now, I like the way that they handle things. They pick up on the headlines of the day, give about a minute of insight on it to give us the most important part of it. And let's have a listen in on the way they presented yesterday, just soon after the engagement in the White House between Donald Trump, Cyril Ramaphosa, and some other South Africans who were in attendance.
President Trump met today with South African President Cyril Ramaphosa, and their Oval Office meeting became tense when Ramaphosa denied genocide is being committed against white South Africans. Trump insisted they're being forced off their land and killed.
But you do allow them to take land.
No.
You do allow them to take land.
Nobody can
and
take
then when
land.
they take the land, they kill the white farmer. And when they kill the white farmer, nothing happens to them.
No.
Now, during the meeting, Trump confronted Ramaphosa with graphic images he claimed showed murdered farmers. Ramaphosa denied the claim, saying those pushing the narrative represent a small minority. Billionaire Elon Musk and several South African golfers were present at this meeting, and they backed Trump's allegations. Now, the Trump administration recently granted refugee status to white South Africans, and it froze nearly all aid to Pretoria.
Interesting stuff. And I'm sure you picked up that perhaps the most damning of all the indictments of all of this came from Retief Goosen, where he was just totally authentic, said, yeah, my brother is a farmer and my mother's been attacked in her home and they live behind fences and they've had friends and people around them who've been killed. So suddenly that took the wind out of any defense, I'm afraid. It certainly seemed to me. But John, you're the expert. Give us your nutshell summary, and then let's go into some of the details.
I think nutshell summary probably is that this was a bit of a not a complete win for either side. And I think that President Ramaphosa parried the thrusts of Donald Trump very well. And probably, got out of the scrape with a few bruises, a few knocks, but pretty much intact. And for us to see what will happen next actually depends on what went on in subsequent negotiations behind closed doors. But it was a very uncomfortable encounter for President Ramaphosa. He really was confronted with some of the most egregious failings of the South African government, of the ANC government over the last 30 years. And there was not really a way to get out of it. The cameras were there. There were lots of people around. And I was amazed at the atmosphere of the entire event to see how raucous it was in a noisy, very, very open, very direct. It's something we don't see here very often in South Africa's media space. But just to see these journalists shouting, Mr. Trump, Mr. Trump, Mr. Ramaphosa, and shouting out the points they wanted to raise was quite remarkable.
And the way that Donald Trump took on the NBC reporter, it was a really dumb question. You're talking about South Africa, and now you want to ask about some aeroplane that has been donated. I guess he was within his rights to do that, but was he within his rights to play the video?
Yeah, I think he was. I do think that President Ramaphosa was taken by surprise. He was probably not expecting this to happen. I'm sure he knew that the white genocide issue was going to be raised, the question of farm motive was going to be raised, and indeed it was. And in a sense, the feeling I got from watching this entire interaction was that it was a bit like, if a young dog comes into your home and makes a mess on your carpet, some people will then rub the dog's nose in the mess. And the rug is South Africa. The mess is the murder rate, the low growth rate, the low investment rate, the high unemployment. And the ANC is the dog that's made the mess. And I think that Mr. Trump didn't let President Ramaphosa get away with it. So he would try to walk away in a different direction from the mess, and Trump would keep coming on back to the mess that exists in South Africa.
Well, reading through the research that you do at the IRR and being a think tank and having been around for nearly 100 years, you have a reputation, well deserved, of being even handed. There were so many other areas that he could have pressed a few buttons on. 142 racist laws, an economy that has grown at less than the population rate for over a decade, corruption, etc., etc. It's interesting that he, though, honed in on this emotive issue, perhaps playing to the gallery.
Yeah, I think he probably was playing to the gallery, but maybe also I think his approach to political communication is to be very provocative and to trigger a response. During the interaction, he also made several references to what he calls the fake news media in the United States, saying, they won't cover it, they're not interested in this. And I think, the insight he has had is that if you want to break through, you need to be provocative. You have to be outrageous. And that is what he's done with his focus on South Africa by talking about white genocide, by creating this refugee program. What he's doing is trying to focus people's attention on what he considers to be a bad state of development in South Africa. And this is the hook on which he hangs that message. I think that many commentators get distracted by that, and then they focus on the hook instead of focusing on the message that's being sent. So, lots of commentators that we read in our media, also in some of the US media, will say, but they're not really refugees. It doesn't fit the definition of a refugee. But what about the other people? It's not a genocide. There's no killings going on. Expropriation isn't really a problem. The Expropriation Act is normal. And this is how people sort of try to divert attention from real problems that exist. And Donald Trump's method is to, as one of my friends puts it, to sort of put the dead pig on the table. So you might, have a dead pig somewhere around you, and you'd prefer not to look at it. But what Donald Trump is going to do is put it on the table so nobody can look away, and then you've got to deal with it. And that's effectively what he's doing here with South Africa. He's saying there's problems. I'm being very aggressive, very outrageous, very overstated in my sense of concern by saying that thousands of people are being killed, white farmers are being killed, their land is being seized, then they're being executed, etc., etc. Many of his statements are not factually correct, but that's not the point of them. I think the point of them really is to serve as a hook to make sure that attention stays focused where Donald Trump wants it to stay focused. And at that, it's very effective.
So, what do you think happened behind closed doors? I've got some feedback that it was really, really tough for the South African delegation. But what do you think logically would have gone on there?
I suspect that they would have raised the issues that that were raised in that executive order from February. So I think Donald Trump very early on, that was within a month of his inauguration or thereabouts, already had this executive order out on South Africa where he raised four concerns, which was South Africa's foreign policy stance. It was the Expropriation Act and the protection of property rights in South Africa. It was race-based laws in South Africa. And it was the targeted killing or persecution of white farmers or Afrikaners, as he put it. And I think those are the concerns that would have been the main focus of discussions, as much as the South African delegation would have wanted to avoid that. But as you said, in the public meeting, we only saw one of those issues really being addressed. That was the white genocide / expropriation topic. We didn't see the other issues being raised very much, especially race-based laws that I think didn't get any mention at all.
There's been some feedback on the BizNews premium WhatsApp channels about this being almost like a typical African visit to the White House with a begging bowl and please come and help us and give us your technology so that we can get our crime rate under control and invest in our country so that we can get our unemployment down, etc. Seems like missing the point to a degree. Almost come and help us to treat the symptom, but let's not talk about the cause. Is that fair?
To some extent, yes. I think this was also partly a defensive communicative move, knowing that a confrontation was likely to happen and trying to avoid that confrontation. You go in and you try to be differential, and you place yourself in the lower position. I think there was also some talk about recognition that South Africa is a minor player in the world. It's not a major economy. It's not a superpower. It's recognition of the power relationship between the United States and South Africa. And I think that's why Ramaphosa and also some of his delegation came in saying, we recognize we've got a problem. One of the reasons we are here is because you've raised the problem. So give us a hand in solving the problem. But yes, I do agree that sometimes it did look a bit like a begging bowl being held out. So saying we can't solve our own problems. Please help us by giving us technology, giving us Starlink, giving us drones, whatever the case might be. But ultimately, the ball is in our court. If we want to fix our problems, we have to fix them. And that means that we have to get our fixed investment rate up. We've got to get our growth rate up. We've got to address our crime problem. We have the resources locally to do that, but it takes making the right policy choices for that to happen.
Could this be a watershed for the country?
Potentially, yes. This is probably it's a very big opportunity for South Africa. There's the opportunity now for um, the status quo, which existed for the past 30 years, to be shaken up, because we already can see that our politics is in flux. We saw the ANC drop from 57% to 40% and dropping further in polling. We are seeing public support for core ANC policies being at minority levels at 30%, 20%, on race-based appointments, on preferential procurement, on the Expropriation Act. We see people in South Africa mentioning joblessness as their biggest concern and very much focusing also on lawlessness. So in our latest round of polling, the top issue, like always, was jobs and unemployment. But rounding out the top 5, the next 4 issues were all crime-related. It was crime, corruption, the abuse of women and children, illegal immigration. You can see what people are worried about. And this has to be addressed for the country to be successful. But it also has to be addressed for parties like the ANC to have a future. If these issues don't get addressed, the disconnect between the voters and the party will continue to increase. And there's only one way for the ANC, which is downhill, if they don't change course and they don't sort things out in South Africa. So this wake-up call, I think, is one of many, which are currently landing on President Ramaphosa's desk. And he does need at some stage to take heed of all these messages coming in saying, you're on the wrong track. If you continue down this track, you're going to be in huge trouble as a political party, as a political leader. The reputation of your organization rests on your decisions now. And if you continue going down the path of low growth, low investment, the future is not bright for the ANC.
What did you think about the team that he took with him and the contribution they made?
Well, so some commentators in the US I see believe that it was President Ramaphosa who brought golfers along. So Retief Goosen and Ernie Els were on the team, but I think they were there by invitation of President Trump rather than by invitation of President Ramaphosa. So Mr. Ramaphosa brought along several ministers. I think John Steenhuisen was the only one who spoke at the meeting, with quite a spirited and I thought also tactically well-placed intervention. And we had the president of COSATU also speaking. What tied all of their messaging together, but weekly, I would say, is the growth message. So both Mr. Ramaphosa and Mr. Steenhuisen and the president of COSATU mentioned the need for economic growth in South Africa. But I felt that especially in Mr. Ramaphosa's case, it was a bit wishful and feeble. So I didn't get the sense that he understood the hard choices that are needed for growth to take off. It was more like it would be very nice to have growth. I guess it's necessary. You might also have noticed that he reversed cause and effect, where he said, for example, for us to bring our high crime rate down, we need to get unemployment down, because when people are working instead of being idle, then supposedly they won't have as much need to engage in crime. But that relationship also works the other way, right? So a high crime rate can push down your growth rate. And that, I'm sure, is true in South Africa. One of the reasons people are not investing is because they're scared of their investment being stolen or burnt down, or their lives being threatened as they go about their business. So I don't think you've really got that choice of saying, we can leave crime to come down once unemployment comes down. No, you've got to address crime in order to get growth up. And once growth goes up, then unemployment goes down. And then you get into the virtuous cycle of lower crime rates and higher growth. But you've got to protect property rights.
One of the things that was quite interesting to me, John, was that on the American side, only one person spoke. Well, I think Trump did ask the guy who went to Rwanda to participate a little bit in that conversation. But outside of that, he was doing all the talking. And yet he had a bench there, to burn. JD Vance was just itching, you could see. He had Elon Musk standing there ready, and a whole bunch of other pretty smart guys, I'm sure, who were just waiting to jump in. But he didn't need them. Whereas in the South African side, it was almost like at times you felt some were riding to the rescue. The lady from Kusatu was strange. I thought that she was talking about a message that is the tourism sector would be really worried about. We're getting old women raped and murdered in the rural areas because we're a very violent society. I don't know if I'd want to go on holiday there. And then you had Johan Rupert, who kind of, to me, dissed J.D. Vance quite badly when he said, "Oh, my wife has read your book and she thought it was quite good. And she said to me that, no, just shut up. Don't say I haven't had the time or couldn't be bothered to read your book," which, by the way, Hillbilly Elegy is excellent. I thoroughly enjoyed it. And I would have thought that it should be on anybody's reading list, not just because of the struggle that this guy has come through, but also because of the message, the strong message that he will give. And who knows, he could be the next president. So that was really dumb to me. But outside of that, it did seem to be at times that certainly Rupert was useful. John Steenhuisen with only that one intervention. Retief, as I said earlier, I thought was very authentic, and Ernie Els as well. Even making the blue of saying, "Oh, you helped us in Angola," which of course is
Yes.
highly politically incorrect nowadays.
Yes.
What was your
Yes.
thought, though, on when you talked about the power dynamics between the two parties in that way?
So I thought the South African team very clearly was playing defense to Donald Trump's offense. And I think that they coordinated sufficiently to realize that, um, in this case, offense would not have been the best defense. So if the South Africans had gone up, hard against Mr. Trump and told him that he was wrong on all sorts of things, that would have been a really, really bad meeting. And so I think in that sense, they handled it well. They sort of parried his aggression by deflecting, by sometimes telling untruths, one has to say as well, doing what they had to do to keep the temperature as low or as far away from boiling point as possible. And in that sense, it was successful. Uh, I guess from our perspective, we'd really like to see the pressure being placed on South Africa to take those pro-growth reforms. And because the deflection and the defense was so effective, the question now arises whether enough pressure is being created on South Africa. So it may be that, they walked out with, as I said, a few bruises, but kind of okay. When actually what needed to happen was, for a knockout to be landed, uh, that was undeniable, indisputable, and had to be addressed. So we'll have to see whether it was strong enough or not with the interaction. Your point also that Donald Trump brought his A team, I think, is recognition, a reflection of the importance that he attached to this meeting. He could have gone by himself. He could have kept it low key. He could have brought some low level officials, but he did bring very high ranking officials. And that is recognition of the fact that he considers this to be important. He was signaling that this is not an unimportant meeting for him.
It's a pity that Gary Player wasn't there. He was in Japan, so it wasn't, as said, he's too old to travel. He travels a lot, and he's busy in Japan at the moment. I'm sure if he'd been asked properly, he would have given up and gone along, because he and Donald Trump, as Trump told us, are very good pals, and they play golf regularly together and so on. So that was one part of it. But I guess this was all optics. It's what happened behind closed doors, behind the scenes. It appears to me that Donald Trump set things up for the next conversation and the next conversations. But can we be hopeful that so many of these, for many people, screamingly obvious issues can be addressed or will be addressed as a consequence of this? Or is that maybe hoping for too much?
Yeah, my interpretation is that this is one more step on the path, but this is not the final step. So this doesn't push us over the edge into reform and into substantive improvements in South Africa. But I do think that the pressure is mounting from many sectors and many areas. There's a sense that there's this three-way squeeze on the ANC at the moment, which is international. So coming from the Trump administration, there's huge pressure on South Africa to introduce some reforms, to get our act together. But there's also big pressure domestically. So if you look at the polling numbers from our institute, but also from other organizations, things are not looking good for the ANC. They've got pressure from civil society organizations. They've got pressure from opposition parties. They've got pressure from parties inside their own government coalition. There's pressure from all these sides, as well as within the party. The jockeying for positions ahead of the elective conference in 2027 has started. So finding a common line on important issues like tax increases or on whether the DA should be in the GNU is becoming more and more difficult. So if you're going to a staff meeting in Luthuli House on a Monday morning, it's got to be tough at the moment. You've got to report back on the Trump interaction. Then you've got the bad polling results of this week. Then you've got your organizational finances that aren't looking so good. You've got to figure out a way forward, and it's not obvious what that is. I mean, it's obvious to us, but it's not obvious to the party. The party, I think, wants to keep its course that it's been set on for many years. Its ideological NDR, National Democratic Revolution course. That is what it defaults back to whenever it's faced with having to make a choice. And getting off that track is really hard for the party, even though it is, I think, obvious what it needs to do. It's got to look at the polling results. It must recognize what South Africans are asking for. They want jobs to be created. For that, the economy has to grow. They want the crime problem to be addressed. They want public services to be improved. All of this is possible, but it takes making the right choices. And many of those choices are reflected in the choice of legislation that is passed in South Africa, like the Employment Equity Act, the harsh regulations that have been attached to that, the Expropriation Act, the National Health Insurance, the Basic Education Laws Amendment Bill, the Preferential Procurement Act, the Public Procurement Act. All of these things are pushing us down the wrong direction, which is the wrong direction for the country, but also the wrong direction for the party, for the ANC itself. If the party wants to save itself, it's got to get off that track. It's got to get onto a better track.
I guess a great place to end is with your colleague, Dr. Anthea Jeffrey, who has made a very strong argument for the ANC being aligned or married to its National Democratic Revolution blueprint. From what you are seeing, is that pressure also going to tell on that, or is there nothing that will get the ANC off that path?
It's a question I've been grappling with, and one that I also ask many of my interlocutors, because I'm trying to get a view of how people see this. The ultimate question that underlies what you're asking is, if the ANC is confronted with the choice of surviving or going extinct but remaining ideologically pure, what does it choose? And to me, it's not obvious that the party will choose survival. It may very well choose to remain wedded to the National Democratic Revolution and go down, um, disappear into oblivion as a result of that choice. It may also reach that point because of organizational inertia. So just through the inability of making hard decisions because of how decision-making structures are set up inside the ANC, it might never get to the point where it's able to choose survival. And if that is true, then its extinction is what looms for the ANC. One of the people I spoke to, I thought, had a very good take on this, which was that you have to look at organizational cohesion at the individual level. And what will happen is that ANC members and officials see the polling numbers, see the declining election performance, and jump ship. Now, we saw that, for example, with the ANC caucus leader in Cape Town was one person who defected to the DA. And if this starts happening more and more because people are becoming worried about the continued existence of the ANC, and start jumping ship and going elsewhere, that in itself is going to accelerate the process of decline of the ANC, which might be left as a 10% party that is ideologically pure, but has lost most of its people, and then is destined for irrelevance. So these are really big choices that the party has to make, and I don't envy the people in the position. It's very tough. You've got loyalties inside the party. You've got maybe compromising information about your peers and your colleagues, that they've got information on you. You've set up huge networks of patronage and mutually dependent relationships, and breaking that is tough. It is very tough. But there's only one way forward that will result in the survival of the ANC, and let's see if the ANC is able to choose that.
John Endres is the Chief Executive of the Institute for Race Relations, and we were talking about the potentially watershed event that all of the world witnessed yesterday in the Oval Office. I'm Alec Hogg from BizNews.com.